Hello everyone! Just before we start today's video, let me briefly tell you that I have recently released a new EP with my experimental solo music project called VAR UMN. This EP is called Ritual, which contains 4 tracks, each 30 minutes long, so you have 2 hours worth of rhythm and atmospheric raw animism, which you can use for your spiritual purposes, be those for rituals, meditation, to be used in traditional folk magic, etc. You can buy the digital copy of this EP at Bandcamp, and you can also listen to it on over 20 streaming music platforms such as Spotify, iTunes, Deezer, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Apple Music, and so on and so forth. I have extended the music genre I have been creating, raw animism, and now you have a long work that will last you for quite some time in your spiritual and magical endeavors. As some of you have already asked, of course, for something longer, right? So you could use it. And here it is. More information about this project in the links below at this video, and more information about this EP soon enough at VAR UMN's own YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your time, your patience, and for listening. Now, let's start our today's video. Enjoy. Hello, my dear friends. Welcome. Thank you for joining me here. I'm Martyrs, and today I'm here to talk about the season of Hallowtide, that time of the year when the departed come forth into the world of the living, and this has been marked by a series of celebrations worldwide. An ancient tradition which we nowadays somewhat still remember and celebrate, albeit in a far subtle way, given the fact that the concept of Hallowtide is not so familiar to most in the modern world, as most people are more familiar with Halloween rather than anything else during this time of the year. Well then, straight to the point, as you already had to endure the excruciating first minute and a half of me advertising my own solo music project. Well, the season of Hallowtide encompasses All Saints' Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day. This whole period has been known as Hallowtide, All Hallowtide, All Saints' Tide, and Hallowmas. The most common term, and the one we are more familiar with as an alternative name for All Saints' Eve, just All Saints' Eve, is Halloween, of course. So Hallowtide is a 3-day period as a celebration of the early church, as spoken here before in the previous videos of this October 2024, such videos under this theme. These celebrations have their origins before Christianity was even born, and early Catholicism adopted certain characteristics of such celebrations and very much kept the main theme of a time when the living and the dead have contact again to a certain extent. Now, in this 3-day celebratory manifestation, the Church kept the focus on prayers towards the departed, which, with the advent of Protestantism, as spoken in the previous video, the conceptions and even celebrations during this period changed quite a lot. But anyway, today I'm here to express this celebration under the Christian religious understanding, which also helps us to understand to what extent early Christianity kept old traditions and the modifications and the new conceptions that eventually are also in the origins of Halloween itself. The celebration of saints and martyrs was one of the earliest traditions in Christianity. The lives and deaths of saints were widely copied and spread among many communities. This was augmented, of course, during the period of persecution, when early Christians were discriminated and abused under the rule of the Roman Empire. That was a period when Christian martyrs were popping out like daisies. So certain communities already had celebrations towards particular saints, and then There were commemorations towards martyrs who died for their faith and to maintain the flame of Christianity alive. Because of the early religious struggles of Christianity within the Roman Empire, of course, obviously a lot of Christian religious conceptions were not recognized, and so sainthood was not a concept that the Roman pagans would so willingly accept, especially the Senate and the emperor himself, as sainthood was giving religious power, divinity almost, to mortal man, and that would be a direct affront to the cult of the emperor itself. I mean, let's say if a commoner could become such a powerful individual, what would that make of the emperor itself? So the power of the empire and on the figure of the emperor was at stake. So saints and the concept of sainthood was something known only to Christians, among Christians, and to God himself, but it was still celebrated nonetheless. The early records of a special feast day dedicated to all saints go back to at least the 4th century of the Common Era. The actual day of the feast is hard to determine due to each community's religious conceptions towards saints and which saints they honored. So the day of such a feast was, well, quite different from place to place, from community to community. However, this celebration aimed at preserving the memory of the saints, each and every one of them, a celebration of the suffering through martyrdom to keep the faith alive. Through their suffering, martyrs became saints, entered the grace of God, and to them it was given sainthood. As such, the faithful, by praying to the saints and remembering their suffering, it was a way to interact with God, as to reach the deity, and the prayers towards the saints function as a sort of intermediary methods or mode to establish a connection with the divine. As was pointed out in the previous video, in the 7th century, Pope Boniface IV dedicated the pagan pantheon of Rome as the Christian Church of Saint Mary and all martyrs on the 13th of May. It was this consecration that eventually led to the annual celebration of the saints in Rome on the very date. So the beginning of a fixed date of celebration towards all saints within Christendom. This particular date doesn't seem at random. It wasn't at random at all, as this was also the date of the pagan festival of Lemuralia or Lemuria, which was precisely a festivity to purify, to purge any ghost or spirit of the restless dead. Some of the dead, for a variety of reasons, of course, could stay behind or get stuck within the world of the living and cause all number of troubles. So this particular festivity was a way to drive them away. Not all dead are benevolent, and just because people die, they do not automatically become good or harmless. So Lemuria served to banish, in the best way possible, the spirits of the dead who might have vengeful intentions towards the living, and if such, I mean, right, if such intentions are a reality among the living, why wouldn't they be among the recent dead who were once living persons, right? Keep that in mind. Anyway, during this pagan festivity, the head of the household would walk backwards, barefoot, while tossing black beans over their shoulder, with loud shouts and clashing of pots. The family would then drive out ghosts. This is something that somewhat remains in certain countries as a tradition in New Year's Eve, and reports back to animistic ceremonies of driving away and banishing spirits through performances aimed at creating very loud and annoying noises. However, the celebration of All Saints' Day was moved to the 1st of November, eventually in the 9th century, which is the date currently observed, right? So the 1st of November also marks the pre-Christian Irish festival of Samhain, which seems to have influenced certain popular celebrations of this day, and may indeed have influenced the choice to move All Saints' Day to this day through Alcuin of Northumbria, who tried to encourage the Emperor Charlemagne to introduced All Saints' Day to the Frankish kingdoms. All Saints' Day observances have been generally quite distinct from Samhain celebrations, and of course both different from modern Halloween traditions. The Catholic Church sees All Saints' Day as a religious obligation, as all Catholics, if possible, should attend Mass on this particular day. Perhaps many of you, former Christians, especially former Catholics such as myself, a long time ago, probably still remember that on this particular day, or throughout this 3-day celebration, the Church often rings the bells to call upon Catholics to attend Mass. This is still done today, at least here in Europe, especially in countries such as mine, highly Catholic countries. So this reports back to the Middle Ages, ringing the bells more often than usual, precisely during this time, to remember to remind the faithful to keep the memory of saints, but also one of the primary objectives is to pray for souls in purgatory, to help the dead through prayer to reach a state of grace and ascend to heaven. So these prayers were also towards the souls of unfortunate people who would die at sea or somewhere else, and as such had not received the proper burial rite. So through these prayers, it helped all souls, including those of the unknown and forgotten ones, to eventually reach heaven. Now, speaking of my country, Portugal, for those of you who don't yet know that, the religious nature of All Saints' Day took a dark turn, very dark turn, on the 1st of November of the year 1755, the devastating earthquake which broke down the city of Lisbon and was felt all over Europe. As if buildings falling down wasn't enough, many candles had been lit to celebrate precisely All Saints' Day, which, with the earthquake, contributed to the massive destruction of the city, causing raging fires that consumed the rest of the city and its ruins. You think that was the end of it? Well, no, not in the slightest. Then there came in the tsunamis to clean out the rest. Over 50,000 people perished. I mean, this event shuddered European Christendom as such a great disaster to have occurred on such an important feast day, right? Anyway, this was just an historical curiosity, but it had a tremendous impact on Europe and on how Christians, especially Catholics, viewed the world, as God had permitted such a horrible thing to happen on the day to honor and pray to all saints and the departed. By the way, I live in Lisbon, and we do have earthquakes every week, but only sometimes things shake a little bit more than usual. It's just a matter of time until it happens again. Exciting. It's not something I'm constantly worried about, but I'm quite often reminded that it is a possibility. And it's curious that most earthquakes here happen during the night when I'm in bed, sleeping, just to give you that nocturnal shake to cheer up your night. The name Halloween derives from the name All Hallows Eve, with Hallows being an old term for saints. Halloween is therefore the day before All Saints' Day. Although it has evolved into something completely different from the past traditions that gave origins to it and has become an entirely different festivity of its own. And Samhain, as spoken here before, is the pre-Christian Irish celebration that marks the end of summer, and it is quite possible that such a celebration was held before it reached the British Isles, quite possible from with continental Celtic origins, and even before the Celts, of course. And what we know of Samhain, that's the point, however, links it to the current celebration of Halloween at certain points. Samhain was marked by bonfires and commemorations of the dead. The end of October seems to have been a liminal point of the year for many cultures, as it is when summer comes to an end, and the shorter days of winter are expressed more vividly. It's a clear moment of change that is perceptible in the landscape and in the weather and in time itself. The animistic cognitive landscape is the stage of many myths and folk traditions, so this creates this perception of a liminal space when the barrier between the world of the living and those of the others becomes thinner, and this seems to have been quite the widespread belief. There are no concrete evidences as to why this became a belief, obviously, without counting with people's own spiritual experiences, of course. But if we indeed try to find an explanation for this belief through the animistic perception, it may be possible that due to a very recurrent belief that the realm of the dead and of some of the others, especially of the underworld, is seen as a projection of this own, with its own climate and weather and landscape and fauna and flora, but somewhat in reverse, right? So it may be possible that this perception of time and space where light and darkness gather may come from the belief that both realms are closer together, and so its inhabitants are closer together as well. Several animistic societies, especially circumpolar ones, often have the belief that the world of the dead and the realm of the underworld itself is a parallel reality to our own, literally beneath our feet, and that many of our ancestors walk with us, right? Just like ourselves, just on the opposite reality, and that each person has a sort of double that walks with us on the opposite side, upside down, sort of an extension of one's spirit living within the underworld. So at this time of the year, given the changes in the landscape, well, maybe this idea that both realms come closer and each one's environment influences the other, right? But this is just my speculation, of course. Be that as it may, it is indeed a widespread belief that at this time the dead are closer to us. Several texts talk of the feasts that were held in honor of the dead and the bonfires lit to drive away evil spirits or the spirits of those who are left behind, or for some reason. I mean, offerings were often left outside the home to appease any creature or ghost that might have not so beneficial intention towards the living. Some cultures even left offerings at their own departed families' members' graves, and this may not have been with the full intention of praising them, worshipping them, or honoring them, but there seems to have been a clear division between honoring one's ancestors, so ancestor worship, and keeping away deceased relatives that may have become vengeful and or evil spirits. But that's a theory I would like to explore some other time. Be that as it may, as spoken in previous videos, such a celebration was also an important moment to establish and re-establish relationships of mutual aid between human communities and the communities of others, the others who were responsible for the survival of the human community, mostly in the fertility sense that brings about good crops and harvests, such an important moment of celebration within an agrarian animistic belief. As such, this offered an unifying moment for a community in a celebratory moment just before the winter season, which in many aspects forces the community to be divided, each with their own families within their own homes. So it is an important moment, or was an important moment, of gathering of communities. And this may be one of the reasons why it was common to extinguish the fire of one's own home to rekindle it with the flames from the communal fire in a symbolic gesture to hold the community together and have the flame of the community in one's own home throughout the winter, as an important reminder of the mutual effort and aid provided by the community, which leads to survival, and obviously survival is the focus during winter. So at least these aspects, the focus on the departed, the fires, the feasting, are elements of pre-Christian cultures that have been somewhat preserved in the modern Halloween, this modern celebration, which also has been greatly shaped also by Christian theology, of course. I mean, Pope Gregory I in the early 7th century makes interesting remarks concerning Christianity in the British Isles, as the native British religions or belief systems were incorporated into Christianity and vice versa. So Christians attempting to convert the natives of the British Isles retained the old pagan temples. However, the idols were removed and replaced with Christian symbology to help with the transition, the religious transition, of course. So, well, the same thing pagan Romans had done before when in contact with several indigenous populations throughout Europe, maintaining certain aspects of native cultures and religions, but replacing some elements with Roman imagery and conceptions, particularly retaining old temples and old gods, but introducing the cult of the emperor as well, and creating a syncretism of gods and goddesses. So Christianity did the exact same thing, and this led to the exchange of the meanings of festivals. For instance, animals that used to be sacrificed to pagan gods would now also be sacrificed in order to glorify God. The focus on the ancestors would now also include prayers and honoring the martyrs and saints. Bonfires were reduced to the candles that were lit in the churches, and much of these celebrations were then brought into the church or were made or held in the once pagan religious structure that were turned into churches, and so on and so forth. So Samhain and All Saints' Eve retained their ritual significance even as Christianity was expanded into other ancient traditions. It is this belief in a moment of the year where the barrier between the realm of the living and that of the dead becomes thinner that overlays the ideal significance to join both the pagan with the Christian, creating common grounds that open communication between the different religious realities. So, while All Saints' Day is aimed at praying to the saints to have some form of aid, to have aid from them, right? All Souls' Day has been to pray for the souls of all those who have died in hopes of freeing those who were in purgatory. Even though All Saints' Day has its origins in early Christianity, All Souls' Day came a little bit later, as tradition has it, through a pilgrim's vision. A pilgrim traveling to the Holy Land was caught by a great storm, which shipwrecked him off into an island, and there the pilgrim discovered a hermit, which gave the pilgrim a message from the afterlife. He had visions of those trapped in purgatory, which were held by demons, and the only way to free them was through prayers, which vexed the demons greatly. So this became a custom within the church to pray for the souls of those trapped in purgatory the day after All Saints' Day, and this custom spread all over Western European Christianity, and it is still held today. The tradition of praying for the souls of the dead developed into the tradition of souling. During the period of Hallowtide, groups of people would travel from door to door in hopes of getting a sweet treat. These people were holy beggars, right? Because they would often sing a song that detailed the deal on offer. In exchange for a biscuit, a cake, some sweet, the soulers promised to offer a prayer for the good of the dead. There has been this attitude within many cultures, right? Especially from people whose life has led them to harsh conditions of solitude and homelessness and no means to get sustenance on a regular basis. They go about offering something religiously related in exchange for a meal or something that can give them a little bit of comfort. Poverty and all things that come with it may be in the origins of the tradition of trick or treat, going from door to door to ask for sweets, which reports back to the Christian tradition of offering a prayer for the souls of the dead in exchange for something to eat, which by itself is a tradition that we already see in pre-Christian cultures, which may have the same basis, right? But with Christianity, there's just a shift in the religious offer, but the needs were the same. So this developed into the modern Halloween trick or treat, and the costumes involved in the process, well, now that's another development whose origins aren't as clear as it may seem, despite the several ideas of a possible origins in pagan traditions, even though the use of costumes during such visits to the house vary quite a lot in time and in tradition, and the use of costumes for these types of celebrations have only been recorded quite late. I've spoken about this before, for instance, as an example for the case of the Yule goat and Yule traditions in Scandinavia, as an example. However, it is far more clear, this custom, in the 19th century, actually, when the procession of solars sometimes included costumes and lanterns made from carved root vegetables. So this is far closer to the trick or treat tradition of modern Halloween than anything pagan related. Even the costumes related to the dead, be those dressing up as skeletons or zombies or something of the sort, are closely related to the displays of corpses of saints and martyrs and death imagery of the churches, which played a very important role in this time of the year, precisely within the All Saints' Day festivity, which was held within the church in honor of the saints and martyrs, in close proximity with actual remains of such people and others who had been anointed by God and had the privilege to be buried in the church. I mean, cadaver display and cadaver tombs, as well as shrines that contain the body or part thereof of a saint, have been quite common throughout the history of European Catholicism since the Middle Ages. And All Saints' Day has had a special focus on such remains, not just on their display, but people conducting their religious actions towards the appreciation of the bodily remains themselves, as the bodies of saints were thought to be spiritually potent and so were often displayed to the faithful, and you can even touch, kiss, and take a little bit of a bone with you as a charm. So All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day was not just a time for food and festivity. It was also a time when the dead were able to interact with the living. As such, the bodily remains of saints were extra potent during this period. The point is, Hallowtide is an ancient tradition that encompasses a wide range of historical rituals and beliefs, which still brings about glimpses of prehistoric traditions, as well as a blend between pagan and Christian beliefs and traditions, and, well, no small amount of folk traditions and animistic belief systems as well. And what still unites all these traditions into a period of festivity, such as this one, are the dead, the departed, the ancestors. So, my dear friends, I do hope you have enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And, as always, thank you for today. Until we meet again, my dear friends.